Previously on the Frugal Jedi. This 2-button lightsaber by HANLING lightsabers from China, as obscure as it is perfect. And it deserves a 5 out of 5. Today will be a follow-up video to that unboxing and review of the HANLING 2-button H-Pixel lightsaber. So we're going to take the core out of this guy, we'll plug it into my PC, and I'm going to go through the folder structure, show you how to edit the config file, we'll add a sound font, and then I'm going to show you how to create a spark tip ignition using the Bluetooth app. Let's begin. First thing I'm going to do is plug in the micro USB adapter with the SD card. And I'm going to open the folder. And before we begin, the first thing that you should always do, if this is your very first time, is make a backup of all the files. So I'm just going to copy them. I'll just put a folder on my desktop. We'll call it HPixel Backup. And paste all my files. Okay, now that we have the backup, I'm going to go back to my USB drive. And you can see how the folders are organized. So each bank is a different sound font. And there are 28 sound fonts pre-installed. We have a background music folder. And we have our system folder. And then you have color matrix, ota.hl. That'll be the firmware file. If they do release new firmware, you'd be putting it right here. And a file in Chinese, which we're not going to have to worry about. So we're going to go into the system folder. And in the system folder, this has all the sound effects for the blade styles, for the sound of charging, turning clash on and off, switching colors, ignition. You can kind of see, and they're all kind of self-explanatory. If you don't like the sound effect,
standard,
we can create a different sound effect for that, or you can just leave it the way it is. So you're going to find a file, and it's going to be called config.ini, and you want to make sure that you open that with a notepad. You can turn word wrap on if it's off, and that way it'll just wrap the text if the window is too small. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the end of the line. So at the very top, we have device name for Bluetooth. So we can give this a custom name. I'm going to call this HPixel. You can call it whatever you like. Be fancy if you want. Pixel number. So this is for a default 36-inch blade or 92-centimeter blade. If you're using a shorter blade, you'd reduce this number. You can also use the Bluetooth app to do this. I'm going to leave it the way it is because it's fine. We're not using a crossguard, so we don't have to worry about the sub-pixel or the sub-blade delay. Channel volume, I just leave it the way it is. And mixer volume max. This is the maximum volume that the lightsaber will produce. And it warns you that anything over 4500 may destroy the speaker. If you want your lightsaber to be really loud at max volume, you can increase that to 4500. I wouldn't recommend going higher because you don't want to damage the speaker. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Clash sensitivity, so that's your flash on clash when you strike the blade. And if you want it to be more sensitive, you just increase that number. And you can turn on stabbing. So for instance, I want to be able to stab and turn on the saber. but I don't want to stab and turn off the saber. So I'm going to switch that to 0. So it tells you right here that 1 is on and 0 is off. Twist, so twisting your wrist will turn on the saber, and twisting your wrist will also turn off the saber. Again, if you don't want to be able to shut the saber off with twists, I would just set that to 0. The twist sensitivity, so if you increase this number, it's going to be really easy to turn the lightsaber on and off using twist. I find 2 to be a little low. You really have to crank your wrist to get that saber to turn on. I find 4 is an okay number. Swing power on, so when you swing the saber, you spin it, it'll turn on. And once again, you can adjust the sensitivity of the swing power on. I find that 6 is just fine. Now down here is going to be all the different banks. And they actually have more than 28. So these ones aren't really doing anything, but we'll just leave it there. What this is showing you is that for bank 1, or the first sound font, the color of the blade will be pure red. So this is the red value, that is your green value, and that is your blue value. This next section here is the type of blade. So it shows you that you have fire blade at 0, steady blade is 1, pulse is 2, rainbow 3, candy, and then so forth. If I want my first sound font to have a steady blade, I'm going to change that to 1. The last number is the special preon. So preons are those special lighting effects and sound effects before the saber ignites. And I'm just going to leave that at 0, so I'm not going to use a special preon. And remember that you can change all this using the Bluetooth app as well, but you can also set it in the config file. What you can't do in here is control the blade in-out speed. That you have to use the Bluetooth app for now, unless they make changes in the future that allow you to do it in the config file. So I'm just going to save that. And now our config file is updated. Let's download a sound font. A good place to start is Grayscale Fonts. They have a whole bunch of free sound fonts, and then they have extra crispity sound fonts. So if you want something a little fancier, you can buy these sound fonts, and they're cheap. The people that make them put a lot of work into making these, so support these lightsaber sound font makers and buy one. But because I don't want to exclude anyone, we're going to just choose a free sound font. That way everyone who's watching can follow along. To keep it simple, we'll choose Mercenary, which is the very top one, and we click Download. Now you have a choice. You have all these different versions of that sound font depending on your soundboard. Now HPixel is not listed, but the closest thing to HPixel is Asteria. So we are going to pick the Asteria version, and we are going to click Download. I'm going to go into my download folder, and there is the Mercenary sound font. So before we can put that onto the saber, we need to extract it. So you right click on it, choose Extract All, just leave the destination the same and click Extract. Alright, so now here is the extracted sound font. I find it easier if we have a window on the left and a window on the right. So on my left, I'm going to leave it right here where the sound font is, and on the right, I'm going to have my USB drive. Okay, so now we need to create a folder that's going to hold that new sound font. So I'm going to right-click in an empty space, choose New, choose Folder, and this one is going to be called Bank 29. I'm going to take all the files from the left and copy them to Bank 29. Okay, let's open that. There are a couple of things that do need to be changed for HPixel. And I'm going to now, on my left pane, I'm going to open up another sound bank. So I'll just open up Bank 1. Now you notice that Bank 1 has all these ZT files, a config file, color matrix, clash, and blast. These ZT files, or ZT files if you're American, are automatically created when you use the Bluetooth app to customize each effect. So you don't have to worry about these files. They will be automatically created if you use Bluetooth. What we're checking is to make sure that the file names are the same. And they are. So Bank Switch is going to play the sound font. Okay, so when you switch to Mercenary, you'll hear that sound effect. Let's just double check to make sure that the swing sound effects are the same. Okay, so you can see that they're not. This is how the Asteria labels them, while HPixel labels them like this. What I want to do is I want to select all the swing L files or swing low files. I'm going to right click on any one of those I selected, and because I'm using Windows 11 I have to click Show More Options, and then I choose Rename, and we want to call this Swing L. Oops, Swing L. I hit Enter, and now it's renamed all those files to Swing L. I'm going to click on the name just to reorganize them so they're in a list. Okay, so it's still not quite the same as HPixel. So I need to manually change each one. And now we're going to do the same with Swing H. So I'm going to select all the Swing H files, right click, choose Rename, and call it Swing H. Once again, I have to rename each file to look the same as the files on my left. Alright, so now the swing folder is done. Let's go to the out folder. So you notice that this has a stab folder for a stab sound effect, while this one doesn't. If I wanted to, I could just take the stab folder and copy it over here, just so Mercenary has a stab sound effect. Oops. You don't have to. I'll just leave it off. Okay, now let's check out the out folder. So again, we're going to change that, rename it. Do the same for lockup. Do the same for in. Now high swing are accent swings that Asteria does, but the HPixel doesn't. We don't even need this folder, so we're going to delete it. And keep going here. So Clash we have to rename as well. If you see these files were the old way of editing the blaster effect. So this is actually a trigger effect, not really used with the Bluetooth models. But if you did want to see what that is, you can open it with a notepad, and it tells you blaster, what it does. It's a spear mode. You really don't need to worry about it. And we're just gonna rename blaster. That is it. The sound font is now ready to go. The last thing I want to do is I want to edit the config file and put in a default color for the sound bank, as well as the default blade style and ignition. So I'm going to go into System, open up that config file again, and right here under Bank 29. And because we don't have these other ones, I'm just going to get rid of them. So currently Bank 29 is red. Fireblade, if you remember correctly, up here. 0 is Fireblade. And 0 for the last number means it's just a standard ignition. Well, I want this to be pulse, so I'm going to change this to 2. And now I'm going to change the default color. And I just like to go on Google and you just search for RGB color wheel. And for mercenary, I want it to be a cyan color. And it shows me that my green and my blue value should be 255 and 255. So I want red at 0, green 255, blue 255. And I'll close it and save it. Keep in mind that as soon as I use Bluetooth to edit any of the effects for Mercenary, it will no longer look at that config file to find the information. It's going to look in its own folder, and it's going to basically find the color and the effects in each of these ZT files, which it'll automatically create. So keep that in mind. It's always safe to delete these files. You'll just lose the effect, and it'll revert back to looking at the config file. Last step is eject your USB drive. And you should always eject it. You should never just pull it out of your PC because you could risk corrupting the contents on the SD card, or you can screw up the SD card itself. And wait till it says safe to remove hardware. And now you can pull out your MicroSD adapter and put it back in your Saber. And now I'll reinstall my battery. And I'm going to stick the cord back in. I'm going to open my LightSaber app. Click on the Bluetooth icon on the bottom, click scan, And there it is. And because I named it H pixel, I see it, and that's the one for sure. I click bind.
Connected.
Connected. And now I'm going to go to control. And now you can see my sound font list is 1 of 29. So if I want to jump straight to Mercenary, I'm just going to do that. And it says light effect 3. It automatically picked it because that is steady. Or sorry, that's pulse. Because the first one is fire, the second one is steady, the third one is pulse. And I click set. And here I can adjust my blade length, my sensitivities, just like I could do in the config file. My twist on, twist off, my push pull on. So that all looks good. And I'm just going to turn the volume down a little bit and turn on the saber. It's as easy as that. And we'll shut it off. And if you notice, the color is that cyan. Blaster. Yeah, there's no stab sound effect because I didn't put one in. I have the out effect still on my screen, where I have my speed set in 3 places: light effect frame 1, 800, and change position 800 and 800. I need to create a second light effect. So I'm going to click on the plus button next to out. And here, again, I want my time to match. I want my length to be 5, because I just want a little bit of spark. If I make it bigger, it'll just be wider on the blade, but 5 is a good number. And color. Normally, for a spark tip ignition, I would choose white, but because I really want you to see the effect, I'm going to leave it at red. And then I press OK. I'm going to preview that. And you can see that red lighting up. And it's only 5% of the blade, or maybe 5 pixels. No, it's percentage. It goes from 0 to 100. So that's 5% of the blade. But if you notice, it's not moving up the blade. It just stays at the base. So I need to tell it to move. Next to light effect frame 2, I click on the plus button. I choose change position and length in set time. And I make sure the time matches the other light effect, and it's all set to 800 milliseconds. And down here, same thing. For end position, I want it to be at 100, which is the tip of the blade. The length, keep it at 5, just like before. And that's all I need to do. I press OK. I can preview it, and you can see that little red tip moving along the blade. So I'll send that to the saber, and let's have a look. All right, let's test it out, see how it looks. I'm going to adjust the exposure on the camera so that you can see the effect better. And there it goes. Well, it definitely works. I would never use a spark tip with an 800 millisecond ignition because it just doesn't look right. It looks too slow, and I would have it as white. So I'm going to make those changes. I'm going to speed up the blade, set it to white, and then I'll show you how it looks at full speed. That's better. I hope you guys can see this on the camera, but it's definitely doing it. Well, that wraps up this video tutorial. You now know how to add sound fonts to the H-Pixel. You learned how to rename it for the Bluetooth and how to edit the config. And now you know how to control the in and out speed using the Bluetooth app and how to make a spark tip ignition. If you found the video helpful, as always, don't forget to click on that like button, hit subscribe, and tap the bell to stay up to date. Next on the agenda is another lightsaber review by HANLING Lightsabers. Same company that made this guy right here, but it's a little different, and I wanted to get it because I'm impressed. Thank you all for watching. I have been your host, the Frugal Jedi, and I'll see you next time.